when most people think about military aircraft, they think about the jet, how fast it is, how stealthy it looks, how advanced the platform must be. But in reality, the aircraft is only half the story. What actually determines the mission, what determines the outcome, is what the aircraft carries. The sensors, the weapons, the payloads. Because an aircraft without payloads is just a very expensive airplane, right? So today we're breaking down weapons and payloads 101. What they are, how they're categorized, how they're mounted, how missions drive decisions, and why integration and sustainment are where the real cost and complexity is. Welcome back to another episode of Brothers in Aerospace and Defense, where we break down how this industry actually works, technically, operationally, and from a business standpoint. I'm DeWayne Allen, your P&L host.
And I'm Rob Wesley, your technical host. And so today is one of those episodes where slowing down actually matters. And that's because this topic gets referenced constantly, but rarely explained in the end.
Exactly. And so the last episode, we talked about aerospace communication, the invisible systems that move information. Today, we're talking about how an aircraft delivers effects. That means weapons, that means payloads, and that means understanding why the mission drives everything. Before we get into today's deep dive, let's start with the newsreel. The top developments shaping aerospace and defense right now. 2026 National Strategy Release, what it means for the industry. The United States Department of War has officially released the 2026 National Defense Strategy, NDS. And this document matters because it sets the strategic direction that drives the defense budgets, acquisition priorities, and long-term program planning. At a high level, the strategy emphasizes 4 priorities that directly affect aerospace and defense companies. Homeland defense and deterrence as a core mission focus, industrial base capacity and resilience, including production, scale, supply chain stability, and sustainment, advanced weapons, sensors, and integrated systems operating across domains, and then finally, a stronger public-private partnership models, treating industry as a strategic partner, not just as a supplier. What's notable here is the shift towards execution and capacity, not just new starts. The strategy makes clear that deterrence depends on the ability to produce, integrate, upgrade, and sustain weapons and payloads at scale. Bottom line, the strategy becomes the policy North Star, shaping how weapon systems and payloads are funded, and how that integration is prioritized, and where the industry investment will be flowing for the next decade. On the commercial aerospace side, Boeing announced a new partnership with Israel's Technion Institute focused on advancing sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. We talked about this before. The collaboration targets next-generation fuel technologies, including hydrogen-based feedstocks and carbon reduction pathways, with a long-term goal of enabling 100% SAF-compatible commercial aircraft. This matters because SAF is one of the few realistic paths to materially reducing aviation emissions at scale without waiting for an entirely new aircraft to be architected. From a business standpoint, this signals that commercial aerospace is continuing to invest in the long-term fleet viability, energy security, and regulatory readiness, even as the industry works through the near-term supply chain challenges. Bottom line, commercial aerospace is innovating, isn't slowing, and it's shifting towards sustainability, energy, and long-term resilience. And finally, Lockheed Martin expands air defense production through profit-sharing model. Lockheed announced a profit-sharing agreement with the U.S. government tied to rapidly increasing the production of critical air defense systems, including the Patriot PAC-3 and the THAAD interceptors. Under this model, Lockheed is incentivized to scale production capacity faster while aligning cost, schedule, and performance outcomes more closely with the government. This represents a shift from traditional contract approaches and aligns directly with the national defense strategy that I talked about earlier, right? And so bottom line, this is not necessarily a new contract. It's just the signaling of how the Department of War is actively experimenting with new partnership models to develop weapon systems and payloads. And also, it's just a different way on how contracting is going to occur. So very interested on how this is going to move forward. Rob, I'll turn it over to you. What stood out from the news for you this week?
I think when you step back and look at the newsreel today, 3 things really stand out. So one being a strategy is driving the execution. So that is not just from a platform development, but also just from a holistic strategy from the government. Two being the industry partnerships are continuously evolving. So when we reference the partnership between industry and the government, it really is to emphasize production, sustainment, and speed, and how can the industry bring the technology for the government and beyond quickest. And then you have the commercial aerospace is investing for the long term, not just for the next delivery cycle. So when you look at SAF and what it can do for aircrafts for the future, I think that is going to be driving a lot of increased visibility and awareness around that, because we want to make things sustainable for our world. And all this is really ties directly into today's episode. It's really because weapons and payloads don't just exist in isolation. They really sit at the intersection of strategy, industrial capacity, integration, and mission execution. So when I think taking all those three themes into consideration, what excites me most is that direct partnership between the government and industry, subcontractors.
Yeah, no, it's definitely different. It's just like how much skin in the game everybody's putting into it, and then with the profit sharing going back to the customer, that's a different way of doing business, right? Definitely from what we've seen in our career. So we'll see what happens.
Yep, absolutely.
When people hear payload, they immediately think bombs and missiles. But in aerospace and defense, a payload is anything that an aircraft carries to create an effect, right? That effect could be sensing something, communicating something, disrupting something, or even destroying something.
And then from an engineering standpoint, that also includes sensors like radar, EO/IR, electronic warfare pods, fuel tanks, targeting pods, and yes, that also includes weapons. But once you choose the payloads, a lot of the aircraft design decisions are already locked in.
Yeah, exactly. So power, cooling, software, weight, drag, certification, all that flows from the payload decisions, right? And the aircraft is the delivery platform, and the payload defines the mission. Let's talk about the weapons categories and how these missions are driven to design, right? So first we got air-to-air weapons. And air-to-air exists for one reason: dominance of the air.
And these really engage airborne threats. So you have aircrafts, cruise missiles, increasing drones capacity just in this day and age. But examples really include the AIM-120, and that's really the AIM-120 AMRAAM. So that's Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missile. But you also have the AIM-9. So that's the Air Intercept Missile Sidewinder. But when you look at the AMRAAM, the acronym is really the Advanced Medium Range Air-to-Air Missile, but really the guidance is around being an active radar. The range is really beyond visual line of sight. And then you have platforms like the F-15, F-16, F-22, F-35, and F-18 all carry this AMRAAM. But when you think about the AIM-9 Sidewinder, that guidance is infrared, so it's really heat seeking. And that range is really for short, close range dogfighting. So that's what, the really great impacts for those two examples.
And I've had the pleasure of working on both of those programs, by the way. So, and these are not standalone weapons, right? They depend on radar and data links and offboard sensors and the overall network. Another one is air-to-ground weapons. And air-to-ground weapons support troops, strikes, fixed or mobile targets, and executes maritime strike.
And really some of the examples include JDAM, Hellfire, JASSM, and laser-guided weapons. So when you break down JDAM, that's really developed jointly by the U.S. Air Force and Navy to improve the accuracy. And this kit really is included and added to 500-pound, 1,000-pound, or 2,000-pound bombs. And JDAM is really that acronym for Joint Direct Air Attack Munition. Hellfire was developed in the 1970s, so this is a weapon that's really a staple for helicopters, drones, and fixed-wing aircraft. JASSM, that acronym is Joint Air Surface Standoff Missile, and that's manufactured by Lockheed Martin, like we're in our newsreel. And this missile has a range of over 200 nautical miles and for the standard version, but they also have an extended range version that exceeds that 500 to 600 nautical miles.
And then it's other laser guided weapons like the Paveway, Maverick. A lot of these systems, use precision to drive complexity, and these are what you'll hear. And when you hear terms of like bunker buster, these are particularly air to ground. They can actually glide to the certain target they need to hit, either fixed or mobile, and they have multiple uses in either maritime. They can be air to ground, they can be air to something else, but it's really about driving their complexity and their precision on hitting on target. This is where you really hit things. These are the systems where when stuff go down, right? That's I like to call it. This is the systems that are the first ones when something gets blown up and things like that. And you can go and Google the many of missions that have been occurred in the last year of how these systems really do work. And they really require rules of engagement, real about what type of collateral considerations that are out there, and then and the certifications on those really all drive the cost of those systems.
Yep, and I would say that this is directly comparative for like the F-35s, while they're still in existence to this day.
Absolutely, F-35 has everything on it. Then you have these things called standoff weapons, right? And the standoff answers are one question: is like, how do I hit the target without putting the aircraft at risk? And this is basically driving to what we talked about, air to ground. Rob, you want to jump in and add more to that?
Yeah, so when you think about longer range, more planning, heavier resilience on the networks, that also includes a higher cost, but fundamentally is differently for survivability. So you want to key in on that survivability. That's what these weapons really tackle.
Right, and a big one on that one is I like to call one called a joint standoff weapon, which actually is JSOW. It does exactly that. It just hits a target. We go see it. It can be laser, EOR guided. It can be guidance guided. It can be active or passive, and it just goes and hits its target at an extended range of what it has to do. Right, and then last but not least, we got guns and cannons. Right, and these are mounted on the system, right? And Rob's case, Rob, they still exist, right?
Yep, they're still there.
This is what we get with fans of Top Gun and those guys to see those real air fights where those cannons are used for there. But they're very reliable, and they are simplistic, but for most guys, but they still matter in the fight, if you will.
Yep, exactly. Even when you think about like those Black Ops video games, those are, have the flyovers that, those guns are on the vehicles to take out a strip of land or whatever it does on that platform. But that's, personally a lot of dogfighting, close to close combat.
So let's talk about how these weapons are mounted, right? Real quick. Weapons are carried on hardpoints, which are structural attachment points on the system. And Rob can tell you about where and how and what they get, what types they're on.
Yeah, so when you think about where and how, it's really around the wing stations, the centerline pylons, internal bays, and depending on the weight, power, data, and aerodynamics, that's where those hardpoints are designed into the vehicle. Yeah,
and there's also a big, if they want to be stealth, if you want to do a whole lot of things with it as well. So some examples is the F-16, they carry everything externally. I'll stand beside a F-16 and you're like, I don't know. It's every weapon effector it's on there, right? Every one we talked about earlier, it's on there. And you sits there externally. From an F-35 perspective, it's often everything is carried internally, right? As well as the B-2 bomber, B-52 or the B-21, they carry big internal payloads as well, right? And every choice that if I'm going to do it about these hard points or where they're going to be structurally is all about stealth, capacity, flexibility, specialization, and then, as always, at the very high level, the cost versus the mission effectiveness of what you want that actual aircraft, what's the mission purpose for that aircraft, and why it needs to have what it needs to have on it. Before we jump back in, please hit subscribe on your podcast platform, right? It helps us continue to bring this content to you. We really appreciate it. And if you prefer watching this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button there. You can watch the full video version. As always, hit like and things like that, and comment and share for what you see with your friends. We really appreciate delivering this content to you. This is a way for us to know that we're giving you the right things that you want to hear. Let's just get into the P&L part of this discussion, right? And this is where, folks get tripped up or just get sticker shock of why these systems are pretty expensive, right? So the Department of War is spending over $380 billion across procurement and R&D, and that's not counting what's happening, what's been led in the new acquisition budget cycle that's going. So that tells you immediately that the platforms, they're not in the platform business. We're in a system and lifecycle business, right?
Absolutely, because when you think about the DoD, it isn't just buying the jets or the missiles; they're buying the mission capability over decades of time. So when you think about a new program coming out that wants to have a new capability, is thinking about the platform integration with other subcontractors, systems, things like that, from a holistic standpoint.
Right. So take the F-35, right? It's $80 to $110 million for the airframe, another $20 million for the engine. You already had, over $130 million per aircraft before you even add the weapons onto it, right?
And then when you compare that to weapons, like the JASSM is by itself is like 2.5 or 3 million. And then the PAC-3 interceptor is another 4 million. But you also have some cheaper alternatives to the aircraft, but it's also consumables.
And the missiles are the variable costs, right? And aircraft and integration of the aircraft are the capital investments that got to be about. So a single mission includes not only the aircraft itself, but it all includes the hours, the fuel, the maintenance, the sensors, the C2, command and control, and the weapons about it. So, and that time, it adds hundreds of millions to the mission, right?
And then when you think about integration, that's where the cost could really grow. So integrating software, flight tests, certifications, testing, logistics, and that could run from tens to hundreds of millions of dollars for over like a whole program lifecycle.
Right. And that's why the customer, and in my experience, when we really spend a lot of time with the customers, it's really about what's the total lifecycle cost of this mission, right? And that's where everybody has to begin, right? When they talk about the type of mission, and when we talk about, that's the signal of, can they afford it, and how can they afford it, and is it important they afford it, and then what can we, from industry perspective, where are our marketing signals for us to jump in if that's what we want to do, but also what can we do to help decrease the cost of the mission to the customer, right? And here's another signal for us inside the industry, right? When we'll hear new terms all the time, and Rob will tell you, I live this day to day, right? It's like when the customers start talking about either newer threats or contested environments or new missions, or like things like counter-UAS and that's counter unmanned air systems. How do we deal with that? There's a big push for that, and what they're really saying to industry is we're going to need new payloads, new software, new integration, new support, and for us, that's the signal, that's the market signal, and that's what drives the growth, right?
Exactly. And from the industry standpoint, they always want to look at, what is the scope of that capability that you want to build, and how long and how fast do you want to build it into the timeline. But from the technical side of things, the multi-domain and standoff are really code for more sensors, more fusion, more integration. So those things all have to be built into that full scope that the industry and the customers need to communicate.
Yeah, other terms that we'll hear is interoperability, right? Or interchangeability. That's a new one that's coming out. And so that tells us what And even there talk about, hey, I need this to be designed for exportability. So that also tells us that we are partnering with our, foreign governments or our partner governments or sister governments, and they want the same capability as well. So we need to make sure that they get a version similar to what we have, and that drives it. And from that, if you put all that together, from the business side, you don't win by selling boxes. You win by staying inside the architecture and help shaping that requirement, which is what I do every day. And this is where not only where the margins live from a business perspective, but it's also where you start hearing and knowing, go through those analysis alternatives to understand what the customer really needs to hit the mission and what is the art of the possible from a technology standpoint, and then what we can go deliver and drive as fast as we can to get it to the warfighter. So key takeaways for today is, payloads define mission capability, mission drives the design, integration drives cost and profit, and systems, not platforms, are what win.
And then from my standpoint, I think it's one simple thing. It's like if you understand payloads, you understand why the program's always continually evolving. And that's why upgrades are never stopping at this point.
If today's episodes excited you, it help you see aircraft a little bit differently, not just as jets in the sky, but as carefully designed systems built around a mission, payload, and long-term strategy. Every weapon we talked about, every payload we mentioned, every cost trade we walked through is a result of thousands of decisions made by engineers, operators, acquisition folks, PAEs, program managers, leaders, all working to meet a very specific mission.
And then once you start thinking about that aircraft in that way, you really realize that this industry isn't just about platforms. It's about integration. It's about execution, understanding how everything connects.
That perspective matters whether you're early in your career, deep in industry, or simply trying to understand how aerospace and defense really works beyond the headlines. As we move forward, we're expanding our conversations. So we're bringing in aerospace and defense executives who paved the way along the way, and some have mentored us or from near and afar. And these leaders have built programs, led teams, navigated complexity, helped shape the industry moving forward.
And really, these stories paired with these fundamentals that we have on the podcast are really how you learn the business.
And so we want to thank you for spending some time with us on Brothers in Aerospace and Defense. We appreciate this community, everybody, the engineers, the operators, the execs, the students, the future leaders who want to learn more about it. And until next time, we say stay curious, stay engaged, keep building the future. But please feel free to like and share our podcast on all your socials